Everybody has a past. I was thinking about what keeps people from rising up, and I think for a lot of people it's because we know our own junk. We know our story. We know what should disqualify us from having God to use us. In the Old Testament, there's a book of the Bible called Judges. And basically this book is just, it's an upswing and a downswing of God's people. It's the nation of Israel doing great things and then doing horrible things. And it's a cycle that repeats over and over. It's like, yay God, why have you left us? Yay God, what's going on? And in the 6th chapter of this book, we read about a man named Gideon. Now, the nation of Israel in this chapter is completely oppressed. They're completely taken over. And they're wondering, where is God in all of this? I mean, they're devastated that they feel like God has forsaken them. Now, I've seen friends doubt the existence of God based on sporting events. Dear Lord, why have you forsaken the Denver Broncos, right? But here's a nation that God says, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I will bless you to be a blessing. And yet they're completely taken over by the Midianites. And so we read in Judges chapter 6 about this guy named Gideon. And what I love about Gideon is that he acts just like how I would. It says that he's threshing some wheat, but it says that he's not doing it out in the field like you would normally do that. And in verse 12, you see that he's threshing wheat in a wine press, which means he's doing it in a concealed spot. He's doing it so that nobody will see him, to not draw attention to himself. In fact, it says in Scripture that he's doing it because he doesn't want the Midianites to know. He's acting like a coward. And then the angel of the Lord shows up. And what I love, in Judges chapter 6, verse 12, it says, when the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, the Lord is with you. And then he calls him mighty warrior. What I love about the Scripture is that God didn't call him how he was acting. God didn't see in Gideon his past. He didn't see in Gideon his fear. He didn't see in Gideon his doubt. What God saw in Gideon was his potential. God saw a mighty warrior. Gideon didn't feel like a mighty warrior. In fact, he questioned the angel, but then the angel says, no, you need to understand that God is going to be with you, and he's going to see you through this. And so he tells Gideon to build this army. And what you see over the next end of the chapter 6 and the beginning of chapter 7, you see Gideon's faith growing in the Lord. In fact, in chapter 7, as his army is assembled, God tells Gideon, I need you to start taking away some of these men from this army. And with each section of men that dwindles away from the army, you see Gideon's faith growing more and more and more until eventually he does go into battle, this mighty warrior. You see, you and I often think our past disqualifies us. But God says, no, no, no. I will use the weak to humble the strong. I mean, basically God's kind of saying, I'm going to use what this world calls broken to redeem the lost. And God has always given us names before we've earned them. I mean, God called Abraham the father of many nations before he had a single child. God called Peter the rock, who wasn't very rock-like when he denied Christ 3 times. And God called Gideon mighty warrior, even though he didn't act like it or feel like it at that time. And God calls us his children. Now, I don't know your story, and I don't know your past, but I do know our God. And I do know that you may not feel like God's child right now because of what you have done or experienced, but your God is faithful to fulfill that name. I think about my life. I wasn't raised in a Christian home. In fact, I was raised in a home that had a lot of drama. If you could imagine it, it probably has happened. Substance abuse and just craziness. I think about me in school. I didn't know who God was, and I didn't know that he would call me to be a pastor one day. All I really cared about was just cutting up with friends. But then I remember that summer, 18 years old, where God became real to me. It felt like an angel of the Lord showed up, and that God was saying, you are my child. And over the past years, I just have seen God time and time again calling me to live out that name. And I see God time and time again redeeming my past, restoring my past, and ultimately reviving my life in Him. I think what God needs is for our generation, for this generation, to rise up and overcome our past in Him.
Brad gave us great news this week, guys, that we are not defined by our worst moment, but rather, through Jesus, we've been redefined by God's greatest hour. So this week, rise up and be faithful, y'all. Rise up and go beyond your limitations and control. See the more that you are in His eyes, not in the world's. Here's what we want you to do. We want you to spend some time reading through Hebrews chapter 11 and 12. Read just those 2 chapters and look for all the heroes of our faith who have been redefined by a powerful God. But pay close attention to how you too have been reclaimed by God through Jesus and now have been given a new identity. Spend some time praying this week as well. Pray that you can begin to know who you are now because of God's love for you. And here's what it is we want you to do. We want you to talk with an adult leader about you. Spend some time talking about you, unpacking and opening up as you circle up with them about how you no longer want to be defined by your worst moment, but rather by God's greatest hour. Guys, have a great week. We're praying for you. Now go rise up.